Welcome to Gayz in Space. I'm Alex Myers and I'm here with MJ Lyons. This is the second part of our exploration of Westworld. I highly recommend you start with part 1, where we recap the original Westworld film and the second episode of the HBO series. Now, we're ready for our deep dive, but first, we need to start the countdown.
5,
Say what?
4,
Nuh-uh.
3,
Go ahead.
2,
Where's my lipstick?
1.
That's what I thought you said. One blast of Gayz in space.
For anyone who's just tuning in part 1, we recap both series. One of the things I think we can maybe talk about to start the ball rolling is how the two films compare to each other. I find it really interesting because in a lot of ways, the two films are mirror opposites in their philosophy and regarding technology. On one hand, like, the original film, like the 70s film, is all like, oh no, technology's out of control. These things are awful.
Yeah.
And the TV show's more like, yeah, robots are cool, but like humans, they're shit.
Yeah, well, that's one thing that I loved a bit. That's one thing I do love it because I mean, like, I'm a misanthrope. I believe humans are shit. And I cannot wait for robots to take over and perfect the world. But that's one thing I really love about the series is that they like literally. I know when I was reading an interview, one of the creators said like the entire point of Westworld is to write a story where like robots are the protagonists and humans are the bad guys, because like every other story about robots is generally like the opposite ways. It's like technology and robots are what we have to fear. So I do like, I think that that's fantastic that like the robots are technically the good guys. And I think it leads to a number. It leads to a number of different like fantastic metaphors for like what the robots in Westworld can represent. That being any kind of oppressed group, really.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so much like robots. Like, I don't want to get too much into that, but like one of the things I feel like we end up talking a lot about is like, what does sexuality mean for a robot?
Yeah, absolutely.
They're not gendered. Or the other one is, what does sexuality mean for a robot? And like, this is one we haven't talked about, but I think could be its own topic for another day. It's weird how like the North American robot, it's always human and robot in conflict. But if you look at Asians, especially Japanese technology, there's such a different like relationship between technology and person. And like, I know there's this one Netflix movie I kind of want to do. I think it's Escape from Heaven or Escape from Paradise.
I've seen it. I've seen at least like the image of it.
Yeah, I mean, it pops up if you watch any anime. For some reason, they like to plug it.
Yeah.
Which is how I watched it.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah.
Well, I think of like the anime Metropolis, where like the main protagonist is like, I guess technically the little boy, but then also the female I can't remember her name now, but is like the female robot, but she's sort of like the protagonist and the antagonist at the same time. So,
and that's like based on the original.
Yeah.
Have you watched the original Metropolis
I
film?
totally have.
Like,
Yeah.
Did you watch the original score or like the modern like rock scored one?
No, I haven't watched the rock score one. I just watched the original because it's very fragmentary, right? Like that's how I remember it, is that it was very fragmentary and very like you kind of have to piece the story together for yourself because obviously there was no sound. So
yeah, that movie was like incredibly expensive.
Yeah.
But actually like worth watching. But again, there is like a rock music one that like people get high and watch.
Of course. Which is, and so like we should talk about like how it is, and I find it is really interesting. I wish we could talk more about like the different. I would love to do like a whole thing about like different kinds of like. I would love to do Japanese depictions of robots because that would be fantastic. But like one thing that has been discussed a lot about Westworld specifically is how AI always seem to be women, and AI or robots always seem to be women, and they're the metaphor of like sentience and like rebellion of these like women robots. So like you have the original Metropolis, you have like the anime reimagining. I just think of like her, like her was so good. And it's the same thing. Like it's a female robot or a female AI who is technically owned. Like it's something that the main character purchases, who then end up like the robots just are like peace out. Like, we're gonna go do our own thing for a while in space or something.
I
so
think her those like transgressive. Like I'd love
Oh,
to do
totally.
her.
yeah, her would be great.
Do you want to come back and
I
do
would-
her
let's do-
and
I would
Escape
love-
from Heaven as those two?
Oh my god, let's do it. Yeah, that would be fantastic. Yeah, no, definitely. And I'm trying to think of some other more recent examples of like of situations where AI were women. I'm trying to think of like the Matrix. Matrix, what was that called? The animated one.
Oh, the Animatrix?
The Animatrix, where no, that was all. It was more of a labor thing, right? In
Use
the
a labor
Animatrix.
thing. I actually really like that
Yeah,
movie.
I thought it was great.
B, there is this idea like, the femininity and the oppression of the otherness that like definitely mirrors the robots.
Yeah.
I'm just also, because we had this in our notes.
Hmm.
Spoiler, we do have notes that we use sometimes. And we like thought of so many examples before, but now microphone shy, I guess.
I'm totally microphone shy.
But yeah, one of the other things is, narrative experiences are actually really hot right now.
Totally.
There's Zombie Run, escape rooms are really big. And there's this idea versus like immersive versus authentic.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
are these things, the fact that you're surrounded and within like a simulation or a narrative escape room type thing doesn't necessarily mean that's realistic.
Yeah.
And it's like these two competing ideas. Do you think Westworld is more immersive or more, authentic?
I mean, it's positioned as both in the show. I think, like in the show,
I was gonna say in the movie that one's a lot easier.
yeah, in the movie, it's supposed to. Well, what is it supposed to be in the movie? It's supposed to be just a vacation, right?
It's supposed to be a vacation.
a vacation where you can do anything. Whereas in the show, there's all of this talk of like the real world just being this sort of like, it sounds like a shitty bureaucratic like capitalist hell, right? Where like everything is really tedious and boring. It's basically like our world, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so like everybody gets away for this like authentic experience that they sort of get seduced by.
I think also the original movie was definitely like immersive because like that was like it was like being in an old West movie, not being like in a place where people act like real human beings.
Yeah. No, that's totally fair. Yeah.
It's like one step between like it's one step up from like those old Wild West things which I've never been to but see in movies where like you've got the talking like machines that,
like the
go around.
animatronic stuff. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Which like again, it's like it reminds me of the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, like the most famous sort of animatronic ride that inspired that entire friggin' series. The Pirates of the Caribbean ride, which like I went on when I was at Disney World, and I found it kind of lackluster. Like I was just, because it is just like it's a theme park thing, right? Like you sort of are riding along in a stupid little boat, and you sort of like you look to your left, and there's like like a pirate being like, "Yar, a pirate's life for me," and then you sort of like ride on into the next room, and it's very much like Westworld the movie, whereas like. One thing I love to compare Westworld to the show is like tabletop RPGs, which I am a big fan of. Whereas like when it comes to tabletop RPGs, I find myself literally just like getting lost in them, and like hours at a time can go by and it just seems like nothing to me. And then I come out of it and I'm like, what? Like I just want to keep going. Like I want to never come out of this. So it's very much about like the escapism and the sort of like the feeling of authenticity, right? Like the feeling of like inspiration and like you're exploring a world, which I think is why I really like video games as well.
And I wonder also like in terms of immersive versus authentic, I wonder if that is also the difference between Ford and Lee.
Yeah.
Lee wants to create these like incredibly immersive experiences where like it's blood and gore and crazy stuff's happening and you're constantly in suspense and there's puzzles and I assume
And you're
there's puzzles.
discovering yourself.
Yeah, as where Ford's like, no, you just want to give them that one tiny like authentic moment. It's you're just trying to give them this moment where they can like see clearly more than what's their daily life.
What we are doing right now is literary criticism.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of fantastic in a way because you do literally have like it is sort of the dichotomy in both of them, and you could see the narrative lead as like he's trying to create Westworld the movie, whereas Ford is trying to create the HBO show,
Yeah.
which is all about like authenticity and stuff. Yeah,
Well, before we get too academic, let's go to the gay stuff.
the gay stuff.
We talked a lot about Peter and John in the original movie. Like, they're definitely like, Peter just got divorced. He's the newbie, and John's like, "Come here, let's have a bro out."
Yeah, which they definitely do.
It's not gay if you're the one receiving.
Yeah, it's not gay if the balls don't touch. Whereas in the show, like Logan literally hates William literally hates Logan. I feel like there's really no love there. Despite the fact that Logan has his whole thing of like basically being like a sex crazy, like he's going there just to get laid, and they even end up at an orgy or something. And I wish I wish the orgy scene in Pariah was explored more, because I feel like Logan could have really shined there instead of just going off with the racists.
Yeah, I kind of liked Logan. Like, it's kind of fun seeing someone have fun in like a quirky atmosphere. I don't know. Have you seen Jupiter Ascending?
No, I haven't.
Okay. I feel like maybe at some point you'll watch it and we can talk about it.
Yeah.
But one of the things I think really makes that movie fail is the main character never seems to have a sense of fun or wonder or amazement at her world.
Yeah.
She just kind of is this boring, like, she ends the movie like going back to her like job cleaning toilets. And not that there's anything wrong with like doing labor or something, but at some point you have to be like, at the beginning she's like, oh my God, I want a more exciting, like she's Belle from Beauty and the Beast. And then she gets in and she's never like, oh my God, this is crazy. This is fun. This is like awesome. It's just like, no, I'm boring.
Well, it makes me think of that, like that whole sort of arc that you just described makes me think strangely of like the Stephen Sondheim musical Into the Woods, where like Cinderella's character literally is like, at the beginning she is like, I want to go to the ball, and then she gets the ball and she's like, no, I want to go back to like cleaning the hearth, which is it's a very fairy tale thing to be like, be humble, like accept what you've got. Whereas like I think that the more fun characters in those sorts of situations are the ones who like confront the sort of like, they confront the danger and like the sort of like the messiness of things too. Like I feel like that's one reason why Logan is such a great character. He's a very messy character. Like he does seem kind of unhinged, even though he's the one with the real perspective of the place, right? Like he begins it and ends it being like, this is just a fucking theme park, and he's the one who ends up getting fucked over by the whole thing. So
yeah, I mean, a lot of it's like, I want to know like the real, like he's nice to William's the thing. He's like, I want to like know the real you. You should let go and have some fun. You're going to be marrying my sister.
It just turns out that when he does do that, it's not such a great thing.
Yeah,
so.
exactly. I mean, it's kind of true. I think maybe the sister should have like taken that as a warning. Like, I don't know what's going on, because like the Man in Black like says that his like wife's always been afraid of him. I wonder, like, did he kill Logan? Like, did something happen to Logan where like Logan like disappeared?
Do we
like,
know? I'm trying to remember what did we end up finding out about Logan in the end? Because there is the time jump. Like when Logan gets sort of like, he's naked. That's a fantastic scene with Logan, right? When he's naked on a horse and William just sort of like slaps the horse's ass and sends him off into oblivion, right? Like, and he's like, basically, I'm taking over your family. Like,
yeah, and I just don't know. A, that's a huge turn for Logan. Yeah. And I mean for William.
Yeah.
And B, like, we don't really find out what happened to Logan. Like, was he like to his sister, like, yo, that guy's nuts, run?
But then we do find out that like the wife and child of William do like believe that William is nuts. Like, there's this, but I want to come back. Like, this is jumping ahead a bit, but I would love to see. I can't remember if we find out if Logan's still alive or not in the like present of Westworld. Yeah, but I would love it, because what we find out throughout the series is that William basically like takes over the family and the family's fortune and invests a bunch in Westworld and becomes a major shareholder. And through various means that's not exactly clear, really like advances of technology and stuff of Westworld. And so I would love if in the future Logan comes back as like an older man in the same way that William is 30 years on, because like technically his family still has a huge investment in Westworld, and so like who knows what's going to happen with that. Like we do know that the wife is dead.
Yeah.
The sister of Logan, but we don't really know. I wish that I remembered clearly if they ever mentioned if Logan is still alive or not.
I don't think they ever mentioned. I think it's one of those mysteries. Like, did Logan die?
Yeah.
I kind of hope, like, there's all in the final scene. There's a bunch of like the shareholders.
Yeah.
One of them just be like, one of the ones who survives just be like, yeah, I'm Logan.
Hey, it's me. I'm back.
I'm back.
Shit, this sucks. Yeah.
And should we go like to one of the more like homoerotic like relationships?
Yeah, let's talk about Ford and Bernard, because that was there was literally like after we saw the original last time. There's been I've seen a couple of articles come out about like fan theories about Ford and Bernard. So we find out in the course of the series, as we've mentioned, that Bernard is a host replica of Arnold, who was the original partner with Ford in when Westworld was built. Mm-hmm. And so there's this huge fan theory, and I think you could make the argument quite easily with the show of that Dr. Ford was in fact in love with Arnold, and that it's like, so then when Arnold ended up committing suicide, basically, he creates a replica of his lost love, and that's not creepy at all. So
yeah, but it's interesting because one of the things we talked about is that Bernard, part of his story is that he's got a wife and he lost a kid. And that's actually part of Arnold's backstory.
Yes.
So he also programmed Bernard to have Arnold's like history.
Yeah.
Because apparently having a pain in the past helps people, seem more real.
yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things that fools people is that Bernard actually talks to this person who's his wife.
Yeah.
But later in the series, when we see like a flashback, like of like how Ford's like twists his perception, the wife was really just Ford like with like screen over his face,
Which
like
is excellent.
And the one thing also that's interesting is at one point in the past, Arnold actually created like this synthetic robot family to imitate Ford's family as like a gift.
Isn't creepy at all.
Yeah, it's a little creepy, but he like, he wants it to be like a photograph. It's kind of a pretty thing. And it's interesting that like all the other robots like get replaced with these biological people, but Ford keeps this like little house that Arnold made him, like this gift from the man he loves in perfect condition, and then makes again like his own photograph of Bernard. In this machine. In this
It's beautiful.
It's kind of beautiful in a creepy, like
very, very
weird
creepy.
God sense way.
Yeah, but I mean, and Ford says time and time again, he's like, we were gods, like, or he says like, we are gods here, like, and he does believe that he and Arnold were gods. So yeah, and like Ford is constantly making references to like that, how he knows Arnold, how he knows Bernard so well, how he understands his mind, which he literally does, because he can pull up a screen and like see what's going on in Bernard's mind. But it does seem really, it seems like a really intimate relationship. And like you, like I feel like you spend a lot of the series thinking that Ford is the big bad guy, and you assume that like Ford is the one who killed Arnold off, because he's the one who sort of explains. He's basically like, yes, Arnold had an accident in the park, and you're like, obviously you killed him, but then you find out that it was actually like it was Arnold who was the one who orchestrated this whole thing. So
I think I thought it was Delos, like I mean, I think I always thought the Delos Corporation was evil.
Right.
And I thought that like maybe something happened where Ford's like, okay, I guess that happened.
Yeah.
And like I thought there was like an Arnold AI, like they kind of suggest that's like really pulling all the strings on everything, but it was all Ford. He was the mastermind.
He was the puppet master.
Of course.
Can we talk about, since we're talking about gay stuff, we have kind of touched on it a little bit, but how, the opportunity of Roman world, like, so in the series we find out, so like Maeve is basically, she eventually sort of like takes over her whole thing, so we think, and then is like being led through the facilities of Westworld, and she at one point does see that there's like, for some reason, all these like hosts in like samurai armor and like traditional like Japanese things. And she's sort of like, what the hell is this? And one of the main technicians is like, it's complicated. So there is this hint that there's like, if not other worlds, then they're at least working on sort of like other, just something, right? Like,
Yeah, and at the end, she gets like the location of her like fake child who
Yeah.
she loves, and it says like Park 4 or something.
ooh, I don't even remember that. But I know, I remember you talking, I remember the coordinates and everything. So it is a different park.
Maybe. We don't know unless they just divide Westworld into
Sure.
different parks.
Yeah, no, that's totally. But I mean, very, very like easily could be, which is like great because that's a whole other way to get into like some other stuff, right? If like, and I think it would be fantastic if like Westworld starts invading like other places, so suddenly you have like, you know, cowboys battling samurai or something, which would be fantastic. But one thing that we talked a lot about when we watched the original Westworld was all of the missed opportunities with Roman World. And so like, I mean, it's an HBO show, so they're gonna go as like steamy and sexy as they can. So I would love to see Roman World brought back, and
Yeah.
for them to actually depict. It would be great if Roman World was like this one beach, whereas it's like where they really heavily advertise it to like gay guys.
Yeah.
Basically, it's like it's a gay male Westworld basically, because like it's all just like sexy slave boys that you can take at a moment's notice, and like, you know, buff Roman soldiers who are down to getting, you know, dirty in the
Yeah.
with their swords. So.
Spartacus style.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Do you think the guests would be like? Do you think the guests would be the people who take the slave boys, or do you think like people would like pay to be the slave boys?
no, I think that like you come up with your own narrative, right?
That's
Like,
true.
and that's one thing that the host explains to William at the beginning of the episode is it's like you literally like you decide what you want to do with it, and then it. And so like I just think. I think about the queer guys that I know with different kinds of tastes in the kinds of sex that they want to enjoy. And I can absolutely see like one way or the other, there's going to be some slave boys in Roman World, and some of them are going to be hosts, and some of them are definitely going to be queer guys who
Yeah.
want to
There's
be scantily clad slave boys. So
Rome World, and then there's like Leather Bar World.
yeah. That would be like, I feel, you know, like if there was like an era where it's like World War II, because it sort of astounds me the extent to which our entire world history is extraordinarily gay, and like people just assume that's one reason why we write History Boys is people assume it's like the Greeks and Stonewall, and there's sort of nothing in between, but like. People have been super homosexual in every era for basically as long as humans have existed. So, like, you could find a gay angle to basically any world history.
Well, it's not even a gay angle. Like, you know, would you want to talk? I think you're more of an expert about it as like the real Wild West and like how gay that was.
So like it's really good that you brought that up, because I literally just turned in a History Boys article that's going to be coming out relatively soon, like probably by the time skip that this comes out, then it probably will already
just
be out.
came out.
Yeah, it just came out on the day that this is happening. But I just turned in an article about like these. So it was a Scottish. It's funny actually. So the story is that there was this sort of Scottish noble, he was the first or second born son, just kind of a bit of a loser who was like probably bisexual or like almost exclusively homosexual, who ended up coming to like America as there was this sort of push towards the West. And so he basically was seen as kind of being a tourist to the Old West. He ended up meeting a French Cree Canadian hunter. They became lovers for almost a decade. They ended up going back to Scotland, but returning to the States. And like, it was basically an all male world with all of the permutations of that. And, you know, like sex for any reason that you could imagine, if it's just like a way to get off because there were no women, or as a means of like creating a home and having relationships. Like sex happened in the Old West for any number of reasons. And I think probably one of the best details of that story is that when he returned to the States the second time, he ended up basically bringing a bunch of like young men into the West, into like the Wyoming Rockies, and they created a medieval fair that was basically like, it was a big gay orgy, but it was medieval themed. So it was like a lot of these guys were basically dressed in like authentic medieval clothing, and it was an all male like blowout basically. So there's just
So he was the first Westworld
he was the
creator.
first. He literally, and it just sort of, it blows my mind. Going into this research, I had no idea, but like he literally created medieval world in what he was experiencing as this sort of like big adventure in the West. So it's funny how these things all sort of come in a big circle, right?
Yeah.
It's just,
That's interesting wording.
yeah. They come in the circle. I feel like there's something else I wanted to say to that
I
that
pushed you
whole
off track.
yeah. Well, and again, like in part of my research, I sort of was just learning about how in all male societies of the Old West, so like say mining camps, men would sort of like create little households together, and it wasn't even necessarily like, you know, there was no word for like homosexual or heterosexual at the time. So there was no conception of people being like one way or the other, but they would create little households, and it was a sort of like, it was a way for them to have a family in these sort of like alien places where they had no like connections to anybody, and they would literally create households with each other. Like a group of 4 or 5 men would build a little house together, and they would have like a communal pot of money that they would split like or like equally when they went their separate ways. Some of the men would like take up housework if they found that they weren't like really good at mining or things like that. So it's just really it always surprises me to the extent to which our ancestors were super gay.
Yeah, you know, I kind of want to visit Western medieval
Western medieval gay orgy like
Worlds.
weekend, right? Like it was literally just like, it was a getaway and a reason
I'll make
for
the Facebook event.
yeah,
now.
there we go. Right? It just, and again, it goes back to the whole like, it's stranger than fiction. Like you just couldn't make that stuff up if it hadn't actually happened. So
And what's interesting is, again, like we're talking about like women as the robots, and Westworld is so much, again, a straight man's fantasy.
yeah,
like,
absolutely.
It's all about like killing and
Yeah.
sleeping
Even-
with the female hookers
Yeah,
mostly.
even the female guests that we see, often those guests are like occupying what we would consider like male roles. Like they're gunslingers and adventurers, but then a lot of them go off and sleep with like women, like which is totally great and like fantastic. But it is bizarre how it seems that in Westworld, even female guests end up occupying what we would consider male roles.
And I think there's actually something interesting going on in the lab. I mean, again, this might be getting a little literary-ish, but it seems like a lot of what's going on downstairs or in the basement is there's these strong women. First, there is Bernard's lover,
Yeah, the QA person.
the QA person, and then there's a Delos
Yeah, the board member. Yeah,
after
Miss Gale,
Miss Gale.
who's pretty scary.
And there's these women who like are trying to take over the park and really just want to take the robots and are like, why don't we use these for practical purposes?
Yeah.
You've like perfected like artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Why don't we have like robot laborers
Yeah.
or robot like house people? And like Ford's just like, no, I just want to use them to like tell my story and create this fantasy world. It's like these women who are occupying powerful positions trying to take over and introduce like practicality versus Ford, who's like this like maverick who's like, no, I want to keep Arnold's legacy. Like I want my park and I just want to tell my stories and like
Yeah. Well, and if we could I think dissect it further, and I think one of the reasons why why one would love Elsie so much and why I love the character of Elsie, and I really hope she comes back in the second season because there's some hints that she may not actually be dead.
Yeah.
But like Elsie there was that really great moment in this episode where she's having the conversation with Bernard, and she seems to be getting sort of lost in like the sort of fantasy of the park, and she's talking about the hosts as if they were human-ish, if not like actual like sentient entities. And Bernard, who it turns out is actually a host, is the one who keeps being like, you're sort of losing perspective, like these, it's just like these are just stories. Even when they seem to be doing human-like things, they're not actually human. So I think that she's sort of like the antidote to all of that, and it's one reason why I really hope that she comes back. I hope she comes back at like the head of a robot army, and she's like, I am your human champion. So anyways,
and one of the things that we didn't talk about too much in here, but it's definitely like a big part of the series, is the idea of loops. So the robots like are in these patterns where I actually find the loops sometimes a little bit confusing. But they're kind of like, again, almost like the automatons going around in the circles, but their circles are much bigger and much more complex. So they'll like, you can go off loop and go on an adventure if you're a guest taking one. But in general, like if there's no guest with her, Dolores will like start the day. Every day she'll like drop the little can, and then hopefully either Teddy or one of the guests will like pick it up and will be her romantic interest. Or
and her whole loop is like she starts her day with her father, and they eventually, like, whoever she's with will end up back at her father's ranch, and depending on what roles the guests have taken, she ends up either being the sort of like the prize that you claim after like murdering her family, is that you then take her into the barn and like ravish the rancher's daughter, or you end up being the hero who does the exact same thing. Like she's supposed to be the prize that you end up saving her after her family is murdered, and then you take her into the barn and ravish her. So one way or the other, she gets ravished. So
and like, an easier example is like every week the like rogues, the criminals storm the thing and try and steal the the bank, or steal the safe from the brothel. And this happens like every week at the same time, and they get beaten. One of the
guests can assume either the role, either roles as like the bandits or as like the lawkeepers.
So yes, there's these two like competing interests, and it just goes in circles. And one of the things is like one of the themes of the show is obviously like the robots often are like more human than the human people. And like, do we as people like get stuck in these loops? Like we go to work, we do it, we come home, it's the weekend, we like play video games or go to a bar, and then we come home and then we start work again on Monday. We do laundry on Sundays, and our lives loops. Are we like kind of closer to the automatons than the machines?
Well, speaking of somebody in a shitty part-time job, a shitty part-time job that is 100% like precarious labor, like I often, I think about this a lot, and I often find myself, like, I think maybe that's one reason why I empathize with like robots in stories so much, is because I do feel like there's a certain class of people in our society that are literally like, they're the sort of like, like the Starbucks barista who you feel you can go in and abuse and they can't really do anything about it, right? Because they're stuck in their role. Like, so you can go in and like scream and yell at them, and you can be an annoying, like grumpy old white person about it. And then you can walk away and go on with your day, and they're kind of like ruined, but then they're stuck in the same loop over and over again. So like, I just remember when I was first watching Westworld, I remember this moment, I guess 2 moments so clearly, when I got ready in the morning, went through my whole routine. I like literally put my headphones on, walked out the door, played the same music on my way to work. Like I was listening to the same album over and over again. Went into work, started doing like my whole like shitty, boring, tedious part-time thing. And my manager was like moving these tables around in our workspace, and she said the exact same thing both days, which is something to the extent of like, oh, customers are always moving these tables around. And I just had this moment where I literally felt sick to my stomach, because I was like, I'm stuck in a loop. Like there's no escape from this. So it's frightening. And also I think that's one reason why I empathize with the robots so much.
Yeah, and I don't think it's just like, I think a lot of jobs, like office jobs, are especially like that.
You have the customers who come in and order the same thing day after day, and
you
nothing ever changes.
input data every day. It's the same like computer, the same terminal.
Yep.
You talk about the episode of Westworld last night.
Yeah.
Yeah. But one of the like particular loops, there was I guess it's not so fresh anymore, and probably definitely by the time this comes out, but there was recently an article about gay loneliness.
Yeah.
And like I was wondering if we'd talk for like a minute about like loops that gay people get stuck
Yeah,
in.
absolutely. Yeah, I think it's a huge problem. It's something that it's something that I think like gay communities and gay publications are starting to explore more and more, is like sort of the loop that we have like crafted for ourselves and what that means. And so I think you're talking about sort of like the two extremes of the loop. So on one side you have this sort of like societal expectation that, you know, you grow up, you go to school, you get a job, you get married, you settle down, you have a couple of kids, and then you know, die. And that's sort of, that's your life, right?
Hopefully there's a few like fun things between that.
You go on a couple vacations, right?
Yeah.
But and now that's something, at least in our society, that gay people have access to more and more, and that has its own problems. And you know, you want to talk about like fulfillment and things like that, and authenticity. Like, what does it mean when you're just doing the thing that's expected of you? And then on the other side, you have this sort of expectation of I think gay guys especially, where you're expected to be this like hot young stud, and like, you know, you go to the gym and you have a super good body, and you like, you know, you go out on the weekends and party, and you know, you live this super glamorous lifestyle, and you have all kinds of crazy hot sex, which is like totally not the reality, right? And I think
that's not the reality for you.
Oh man, you're just really, you know, making me sad. It's like I'm going home and literally playing Mass Effect for the next like 72 hours straight. But like that's gonna fuck you up that's going to fuck you up in different ways, but in similar ways, like from the expectation that you're supposed to like, you know, get married and settle down. So like, anyways.
Well, part of the author's like thesis is that like being queer like is often like exposes you to lots of traumas. And even though like even people who like didn't have super homophobic parents, whose like parents were in PFLAG, like just the, you know, added stress of like being queer and coming out, you know, adds issues. And I don't know if I entirely buy that, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, like I always I
mean, but he does bring the evidence that you know, even though like gay people or queer people, well, really we're talking about gay males, have gotten more social acceptance. I think trans people are still really fighting right now. And
well, and you certainly you certainly do see a lot higher rates of like depression and suicide among like among queer communities, but then also like even worse in trans communities. But I always
2 and 10%.
Which is insane. But like you also have to wonder, and I mean it's certainly something that people have explored, is like how much of that is just the sort of external factors. Like if you're just a queer person sort of left on your own to like, you know, go about your life, and you had like, you know, peace of mind, and you could sort of just like go along, then you'd probably be pretty okay. And even if you had even if you had like mental health issues, it wouldn't quite be as bad as when, you know, you go on Twitter every day and it's like, you know, this fucking terrible person believes that you should all be dead, and it's like, well, that's obviously going to have a bit of an effect on you, right? So like this whole issue of gay loneliness, like I mean obviously it's a bunch of different factors, but when I didn't get through the whole article because I was just sort of reading it, and it spoke to me so little. I think because I think as a queer nerd, I've actually sort of found the best like place for myself, if that makes sense. Like I found the community that is sort of more settled and takes good care of me, and I've also like I've created that community for myself. where was I going with that? So yeah, I think that I just found the article spoke to me so little because like I just have no conception of what it's like to feel like you need to go out on the weekends and do a lot of cocaine and have a bunch of like crazy messed up sex and then go to work on Monday because it's just so not my life. So I wonder how much of that is just a corner that as a community of like queer and gay men we've painted ourselves into, right?
I mean, I also wonder, and this, hopefully if you've made it this far, you like me a little bit, because I'm going to say something that's kind of maybe a little controversial.
Oh no.
I think sometimes we don't talk about gender in terms of men enough. And I'm not like a men's rights hashtag not all men's person.
Really took a left corner there.
Yeah.
Oh.
But I think part of what we don't talk about enough is like, I think sometimes the way we construct masculinity in our culture is really like unhealthy. Like from like the fact that like we talk about rape culture in terms of what women should do way more than we like talk about like men should not be raping women.
Yeah.
To the fact that, you know, women tend to like, women are supposed to be communal. They're supposed to like have their friends and their support network, as we're like men are supposed to be alone. They're supposed to be competitive.
Yeah.
They're supposed to be agentic and all that. And I wonder if part of gay male loneliness is just, you know, Western heteromasculine loneliness. Like, you know, I feel like when people get married, a lot of times, like the guys I know will lose touch with like their like incidental friends and will start adopting like their wife's like family friend group. So I'm curious, I don't think it's nearly comparable, but what the rates of depression and anxiety are amongst like heterosexual men
well,
who are single.
I have a lot to say to that. I think that like I think what you raise is like a feminist issue, right? Is like feminism is at its core tackling not only women's issues but like issues of toxic masculinity and like expectations, like what's expected of men. So if you're told all your life that like you need to be the competitive cutthroat breadwinner and you know you need to provide for your family, and that means basically having like no emotions and like you know you have to just be like, you basically have to be like a terrible person, then that's obviously going to have some effect on you as like as a person and a man, as much as it's going to like, you know, you're going to ruin your own life as much as it's going to ruin the lives of people around you if that turns you into like somebody who believes that like women's bodies are yours, or like that like you basically don't have to believe that women have any problems, which it's never made any sense to me. It's like you have to believe that like women have equality and stuff, so somehow. So
I know, but I think even more like, I mean, I don't think we talk about like paternal leave enough.
Yeah.
Like,
totally.
We're like, why don't women take these leadership positions? But also like the positions women take, I'm not convinced they're not as valuable. And part of it, being paid less, I think, is because they're women. But part of it is like, why aren't we encouraging men to take positions that are more communally based? And why aren't we encouraging men to take mat leave? Because taking care of children is important and useful.
Yeah.
And as a gay man who hopes to one day potentially have a partner and have kids, I want that extra leave.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Well, you want to talk about like labor, and like there's this huge movement of like what's emotional labor, and it's expected that women are going to be the ones it's like, you know, women are going to be the ones who have to take mat leave and take care of the kids, but it should be a thing that's split equally,
or not split equally, but
or
a man should be as likely to take that position.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Like I've picked up, like I have nephews and I've picked them up from school, and I am one of very few men there.
Yeah.
And you almost have to like explain why you're there. I mean, maybe because I'm also an uncle, but still it's like this, you know, it's definitely disproportionately adjusted. Yeah. And, you know, and we can say lots about schools, because I have mixed feelings about like, you know, it's funny, as soon as the kids start going to school, they start talking about, is this a girl's thing? Is this a boy's thing? Yeah. And that's like not a thing like that their parents really taught them. It's something that like even though the teachers, I don't think teach it, it's so built into the culture. And
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know what the solution to that is, but it bothers me.
Yeah, I feel like there was something more I wanted to say. Well, I mean, we're talking about what we are talking about Westworld, and we're talking about issues of loops and social expectations. Just we're talking about like basically we're talking about programming. Like we're programmed to believe all these things, and it's a system that we all kind of subscribe to without having really any choice in the matter. And so even just like you want to like, maybe I'll get into my whole like super radical lefty like anti-labor like pro-socialism thing, but like there's a really fantastic article that I read a little while ago talking about the entire idea of work as choice. And it's like, if we have no choice between like working or not, like if you can't survive without being like a quote unquote productive member of society, then there's no real choice there, right? And so what's the difference between like slavery or prostitution with, like an office job that you kind of hate but that you have to go to anyways? I feel like I'm really getting off the rails here. Like,
Yeah. So let's talk about Grindr as a video game.
Grindr is a video game. Let's do it. I think that like I was certainly the one who brought that up.
Yes, you are.
When we were talking about it, and there was a bunch of like when Tinder became a thing too, like there was a lot of really good writing about how Tinder was literally designed as a game. Like you have the whole swipe left, swipe right thing. You match, then you don't talk to anybody because apparently you're just collecting matches. Like that's how Tinder is always. The couple of times that I've used it, it felt to me like people just do it to sort of have the like immediate validation of like I've matched with people, therefore I am valid as like a sexual and romantic person.
It's a game of hot or not.
Yeah, I'm so right. And Grindr,
very, very sad and depressing game of hot or not.
God. Well, like hot or not was a thing, right? Like. There was that website where you literally just like you put pictures of yourself and people rate you, and then you end up with a rating, and that's the complete extent of the site.
Okay, Cupid made like an offshoot where they're like, test your photos, and people would like choose which person was hotter.
That's miserable.
Yeah.
But like, so back to Grindr, it always to me felt more like something that wasn't really rooted in reality. That's probably partially like a me thing where like I am also an extremely cautious person and I just don't really take any chances.
You're not wandering the streets playing Grindr like Pokemon Go.
Yeah, like
I caught 3 twinks today.
I wish I could be that person, kind of. But it always to me felt more like a sort of, and I've heard it described as such, being like more of a diversion than a means, like you want to talk about gay loneliness, than as a means of like, building community and authentic relationships, which is, again, it's going to have an effect on the people who use it, because then you hear a lot about people who, and it's been expressed by a lot of queer guy friends of mine, where they feel like Grindr is only a means of validating themselves. So like if they go on Grindr and nobody's talking to them, they just feel completely depressed. So then they feel like they have to go on it more to get any kind of validation that they can. And like similarly in the adverse way, like you go on Grindr, you have a bunch of people talk to you, you're like, oh, I'm hot shit, like everybody wants to talk to me, and so then you feel like a really good person, so then you get addicted to that validation and like you need more of it. So it's very much
watch Please Like Me.
Yes, I
love
love
the newest season. Where the mother's just like, that sounds like an awful lot of rejection.
Yeah,
She's like, I don't just get rejected.
yeah. Oh, and like, yeah. Oh God, we should do an episode, or we should do an entire thing of Please Like Me, because I could literally talk about that show for ages.
I love that show.
Yeah, it's so good.
I was watching it before anyone else, before it was on Netflix.
I was watching it before anybody else and before it was on Netflix. So
I've been watching like since the first season. I like read an article, maybe it was an article by you, who was like,
it was definitely an article by me. I found it first, and nobody found it before me. My friend Jeremy, who I mentioned at the beginning, he was the one who introduced it to me.
Oh,
but then I like to pretend that I find all the things that I find on my own. So because I'm a shitty person.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I had like an actual point about like the gay loneliness and the rejection, and I wonder if it. I don't know. Have you seen the movie Latter Days?
Yes, I have actually. It was garbage. It was
Yes,
not a
it's
good
garbage,
movie.
but it's one of those garbage movies that I love because it's like old enough that it's like one of those movies where like, you know, when you're like a teenager and you like don't have any other representation,
Yeah,
you're like, just
obviously.
give me some sort of gay.
It's queer as folk. Like, it's terrible, but it's the only thing that we have, right?
I love the original
Oh,
queer, the British
God.
one.
Oh, okay. I haven't seen the British one.
I haven't seen it in years, but it was like
Yeah.
remember when Showcase was actually edgy?
yeah, yeah.
Anyways, you know, there's a line in that film like everyone always dances with like an eye on the door, like waiting for someone better to come in. Like it kind of perpetuates that culture where like
Yeah.
you're not even like trying to find a partner, you're just trying to find like almost you're having sex with someone as like validation for yourself, but you're always looking for someone better to like you're just the Paris Hilton of like, you know, always looking for someone better so you can socially climb up.
Yeah.
Until you get old and then you're constantly on the decline and like
Yeah, you're once you well, I mean, there in the American Queer as Folk, there was that whole fucking thing about once you turn 30, you're dead as a gay man, which I just can't imagine what that did to people. Like, I have friends who are like literally, I've watched them like coming up on 30 and they just feel like the worst person ever because they haven't found like any kind of long-term relationship. They haven't reached the milestones and they feel like their life is ending at 30, and I blame Queer as Folk for that. So
friends, I'm sitting right here. Did you not hear the opening comment?
yikes.
I'm just going to cry for a few minutes and
Okay. That's how I want all of my conversations to end, is with the other person crying. That's my version of queer sex, is I want the other person to cry and I want to feel better about myself.
So before we finish off, let's talk about season 2 and our either predictions or our wish
Fantasies,
list.
yeah, I was gonna say, because like certainly as much as I want them to go, I want like robot cowboys to invade robot Roman world and then to have like a bunch of gay orgies with gay robot Romans, but I don't think that's gonna happen. So
Yeah, and like I wonder if like people in like robot and Rome world maybe like don't have such bad relations. Like the Wild West is all about like raping and pillaging and being chaotic, but like Rome was like an order. Like
yeah, but Rome was also about like like conquering and enslaving people. So like
that's true. I just want some naked Roman
yeah,
robots.
oh of course.
Or like any sort of like
Well, I mean,
super gay theme.
well, like Samurai Japan was super gay. So like again, it just goes back to how gay history was. So,
But queers and Asians? That's too much even for HBO.
yeah, seriously.
You can't belong. Next thing you're going to do is like want an Asian woman in a lead role.
yeah, get Scarlett Johansson to play.
Yeah, exactly. I have to be honest, at the end of the season, you know, Maeve finds out that like she's actually programmed to run.
Yeah.
And then she has this big moment where she like gets self-actualization. She's about to get on the train to finally escape Westworld, but in the end she decides not to, and she, you know, stays in the park to rescue her daughter.
Yeah.
I was actually kind of disappointed. Like I wanted to see her get out there because I'm really curious what the world outside of Westworld looks like.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like a big part of like season 2 will be like humans trying to reclaim Westworld, especially like because Delos is a corporation, and so they've clearly if they've created a Western themed amusement park where they have a bunch of AIs, it's probably a little bit expensive. So I feel like my hope is that we actually will get to see a little bit of the shitty outside world. And maybe see why so many people are into it, or maybe it'll just keep it completely in the context of Westworld. I mean, that's obviously going to be a big part of it, is like the humans versus AI, and the AI all sort of like self-actualizing and what that looks like.
At one point, Ford like suggests to Bernard that they've cured death. I wonder, are people like, have they actually cured death, or have they just eliminated disease?
Yeah.
So I wonder, maybe if people are virtually immortal outside and it's just like literally again stuck in this depressing loop every day and forever, maybe like the idea of like, you know, paying a lot of money and like experiencing something that's completely different actually starts to make sense, because otherwise Westworld only really makes sense in terms of it really being supposed to be an R&D facility for these robots that they'll ultimately end up like selling, and then it'll become, I haven't watched it, but that TV series Humans, some people say is good.
No, I haven't seen it either. Predictions. I do hope that I like we said earlier, I do hope that Ford comes back, and I hope he's basically like, I feel like he probably left a bunch of like really, because he has a huge ego, right? That's his whole thing. So I feel like he's probably left a bunch of basically like memories or like sort of like instructions to the robots to sort of help them through their difficult time of transition from being slaves to being murdering, rampaging, like like basically the master race, I guess. So I do hope, I really, really want him to come back. I feel like they can't just kill off Anthony Hopkins from the series completely, so I feel like he will come back a little bit.
I thought the idea was like Anthony Hopkins is like way too famous for them to be able to afford for more than one series. They're just like, all you have to do is one season, then we'll
Right.
kill you off, and maybe you'll appear as a guest character.
I guess with Game of Thrones, it's once they're dead, they're dead.
Yeah.
So not a whole lot of coming back for them.
I mean, but in here you can, like, he had that printer in the basement,
Yeah.
so like, is Elsie going to come back as a
that would be
robot, or is she
fantastic.
going to come back as a person?
If Bernard brought Ford back as a robot and then was like lording over him in some way, that would be fantastic too. If like, I don't know. Anyways, I just feel like there's a lot of potential there. Yeah, I forgot about the printer and like them, because they'll obviously create like an army. They'll take over the facility and create an army of robots. That's sort of one thing we don't really know, because at the end of the season, we found out that the facility was kind of on lockdown and a bunch of humans were locked in to their like workspaces. So we don't really know exactly what happened with the facility yet.
Do they suffocate because they didn't create proper ventilation?
Oh, they didn't learn their lesson. They didn't watch the original.
But yeah, I also wonder, do you think Bernard's going to be on the robot side, or is he going to stick with the humans and try and, work with them and try and make peace?
Who knows? And what will happen with like the samurai people? Because again, like I love the potential of the mixing of the worlds. Like if suddenly you have these like, if you have like an army of robots inhabiting this Western world, but like incorporating like samurai weapons and armor and stuff, and then like bringing in like outside like futuristic guns and things which they were all fighting with. So I love the potential of the mixing of worlds. I hope that they do some more of that stuff. I'm trying to think of what the precedent would be for an HBO show, because I mean Game of Thrones is its own world, so like there's not really, it's all basically inhabiting George R.R. Martin's world. So like what is HBO going to do with an entirely original world?
I mean, True Blood, they weren't able to maintain the quality.
Yeah.
The more they diverge from the material. But I think, isn't this being done, not Christopher Nolan, but one of his brother or something?
Is it?
I don't know. It's someone talented.
Right.
And apparently after like the pilot, they like had an original idea and they're just like, this isn't going to work. And then they like apparently put it on, I don't know what the term is, but they put things on pause while they just completely restructured everything and created like a coherent plot.
Right.
So I think they'll do that again for season 2. So I think it'll again be a big mystery.
Right.
But I hope it's not, sometimes shows get locked too much into like, let's copy the success parts from season 1, and you're just like, do you watch The Flash at all?
Yeah. No, I don't. No, I don't watch The Flash at all.
I really like season 1. And it was cute, and Grant Gustin is adorable, and I just wanted him so badly to be gay in the series. Why can't we have a gay Flash? Hashtag gay Flash.
Hashtag.
Or queer Flash. He was like one of the warblers in Glee originally.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's kind of
he's
fun.
cute. He was definitely like, he was like the bitchy
Looks
gay
good in
antagonist
suits.
to
that's
Kurt.
That's terrible.
Like the one who like,
I did get that far into Glee. I'm sorry.
I didn't really.
Speaking of
but,
shows
like,
that go off the rails, like yeah, you followed the gay stuff, obviously.
a little bit. I'm like, I saw the YouTube clip of like him and like Kurt and Darren Chris's character like bantering was fun.
Westworld. More gay stuff. I don't know what that'll look like, but with the barriers breaking down and robots suddenly realizing they're robots, what does it mean to like be a Western man, but you're actually a robot, and like with a bunch of other hot robot Western men. So.
Speaking of which, I want more hot robots.
Yeah.
Who are men. Like,
Who are
the
men,
women
yeah.
are
Yeah,
beautiful.
beautiful and great and fantastic. Yeah, I mean, I wonder what they're going to do as far as introducing new characters. Like, what are new characters going to look like in a show where like all the characters are like the same old people? But
Again, not to be a broken record, but I'm hoping they look like naked Roman boys.
yeah, naked Mormon boys. But then also with the idea of them creating like new new AI and robots as well. I mean, there's plenty of opportunity there, and just to explore. I love the idea of like when Westworld is like getting into the territory of post-humanism, and I love like post-humanism territory when it comes to like sci-fi and fictional stuff. So like what does sex and romance look like in a future when everything is like automated and robots and they are all trying to like discover their own sentience?
So now this is going to sound awkward because you just brought it to the sex place. But I was thinking when you're like, what about these robots like now like gaining sentience? I'm like, what about the horses? Do they gain sentience? Like, do they have the same brain?
What happens when a robot horse mounts another robot horse? Like, we don't know. We're just asking questions, right?
But yeah, it's like, did you see Battlestar Galactica?
Yes. Yeah.
I didn't love the ending.
I love the ending, but that's fine.
That's a different topic.
Yeah, seriously.
But yeah, one of my favorite things is the speech, I forget what his name is, gives at the end, who's like, why did you like make me in this human body?
Oh yeah,
I should be able
Father
to
Cavill.
like,
Yeah, Father Cavill.
I should be able to like taste like antimatter.
Yeah.
Why can I only
Yeah.
see what humans can see? I should like
be able to see the entire spectrum of sight or of
of radiation. Like, why did you limit me so much?
That
to
was
one
a
of
really
these?
fantastic speech. Yeah.
Yeah, like I wonder if like the robots, like what's going to stop them from making like super robots?
Yeah.
Like, why should they be comparable to humans?
Yeah, why? Well, and like, yeah, and then you're getting into Matrix territory, right? Like, you suddenly have, because like that's like the whole arc of the Matrix is they started out as being these like humanoid laborers, and then they basically became these like tentacle monsters. So, I mean, maybe that's getting into a whole new territory show for that.
So I actually had this crazy theory early in the season. Where I'm like, I wonder, because they were like making a point of the stars being whatever. I'm like,
Yeah.
I wonder if like Westworld's on the moon or something crazy like that. Like,
Yeah.
what if Earth's like overpopulated and like they had to like send people like that's where there's space.
I mean, again, we have no idea. Like, you don't really know if Westworld is like a dome, like like a dome enclosed thing, as like a space station. Very easily could be that. Or if it's just like, like a section of Earth sort of cut, like a swath cut out of that. Like, we don't know a whole lot about the world besides what like we've just seen in the show. So, and it seems to be a world that they just sort of feel they can kind of like tear down and start over again at will. So, and now the robots have all of that technology. So, or at least they're trying to get it. So,
Yeah, it'll be interesting what happens. Do you have any last thoughts before we move on?
more gay robots.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's just my.
That's the theme.
I mean, generally, yeah.
That's the cure to gay loneliness.
Is
We
more
just
gay
need,
robots.
like-
More gay robots or boning gay aliens. I think that's our main takeaway from this entire conversation.
So, as a first-time guest, we have 3 Funko Pop dolls for you to choose one of.
Oh, are you kidding?
We have Kung Fu Panda Tigress, Zootopia's Mr. Big, and we have Nibbler from
Oh,
Futurama.
I'm gonna take Nibbler. Oh, you don't
Okay.
have to do that though. I feel bad taking your
No,
Funko
don't.
Pop.
That's why they're there.
Oh, I get
Although
Nibbler.
he's got creepy little zombie eyes.
That's totally fine.
I'm waiting for the day where someone's just like, I want Mr. Big. I love him.
But I do love Mr. Big, and I don't really do impressions, but I do a mean Mr. Big impression that I'm not going to do on air.
Okay.
So,
Anyways, I just want to thank everyone for listening. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe and leave a comment. Any queer or nerdy topics you'd like us to talk about, anything we missed, we'd love to hear your feedback. I don't know why I record that every single time. It's the same thing.
I could always interrupt, like
Yeah.
I'm doing right now. So
You can reach us at gayzinspace.com, gaze with a Z at the end. Or Z for our American.
the only way to
compromise.
spell gays.
Yeah. Well, originally it was like Gayz in space, one word. And my friend's like, gay sin space. We are not the gay sin space.
I mean, Gayz in space sounds great to me. But
Yeah.
I am the one who's been talking about going home and boning aliens. So you can check out our profiles on the website gayzinspace.com. There's a space to leave us a direct message and links to all of our social media. You can also look me up on Twitter. It is @queer_Mikey. Mikey spelled Mikey, because people do actually seem to spell it like Mickey all of the time.
Yeah, I might have been the one who did that.
No, people do it all the time. Don't worry.
And you're MJ on the website.
That's right.
And I'm on Twitter @Alex_Myers. Myers is spelled Myerz.
We have to
Thank you all for listening, and until next time,
we are the
Gayz
In space on a sexual crusade.